over investing in other types of productions. This is sort of to everyone, so anyone that wants to jump in.
Well, I guess to my point, I'd go back and, oh, sorry, Sarah. Do we clash?
No, that's all.
You're on it. No, I guess I'll just reiterate my first point. I'm in my experience of the university sector, nearly everyone's making single camera programming, whether that's documentary style, filmmaking, short film, whatever it might be. So single camera, microphone, lots of post production. That's kind of a given with nearly every TV course, whether it's whatever the focus is, I think. The bit that I think, and it's basically repeating what I said before, the opportunity to work as a team and do multi-camera production is the bit which is hard in the classroom. And there's loads of people out there who want things filmed. That's the really cool thing, right? There's people who want stuff. There's charities, there's local events, there's music groups. It's not there's not a shortage of people who want stuff to be filmed. And if you can find an excuse to film it, it almost doesn't matter from your perspective what the content is. It's the opportunity to get together and do multi-camera production. Think about, how am I going to add graphics? What should they look like? Do I need sound effects? Do I not need sound effects? Do I need replays or just some video play-ins that set the scene? All that kind of stuff, and build those and work out what they look like. And putting together the infrastructure, I would encourage you to put it together in a way which is modular, so you can move it. Because if you just build it in one place, it will restrict the opportunity. And if you're able to make get bits of kit, I know that money is involved. That means you can go to theatre or go to wherever. Then obviously you can the opportunity to do a lot more.
Also, part of that modular means you can expand it as well. So if you start off with just one or two, and you haven't got the money to expand, by building it modular, you can then just keep on adding on. As soon as you get more, if you've got a big job to hire some bits in, you can then easily add on and expand and exponentially create bigger, better productions, basically. But yeah, you can almost build, like what you were saying, Andy, a sort of an OBD rig kit that you can use in a TV studio. Then you've got the best of both worlds. So you haven't just got that outside broadcast side, you haven't just got the studio side, you've got that stuff you can take anywhere and do anything, and then you're the best that's out there, basically. You're the best of both worlds. You can do anything and you can just keep expanding.
And the kit that people always forget about, I noticed on the drawing, there's some vision and sound. People always forget about comms and talk about quick what you want. And that's, again, really important. If you're going to learn those communication skills, you're going to need to have some sort of communication system, which means you can discreetly, the director can chat to the camera operators and the A2s and other people, so you can have that proper production coordination. People all rush out and buy very expensive cameras, and they buy expensive 4K vision mixers, but you don't really need 4K, to be honest with you, at all. You'd be better off saving some of that budget and thinking about getting some sort of entry-level communication system, whatever that is, so you can have that part of your production really going really well, and you're learning those communication skills that Stuart and I both talked about.
Yeah, to be fair, I've worked while working with other students, had comms fail, and a WhatsApp call with headphones just doesn't quite match actual comms when it comes to communication.
You'd also be better off buying second-hand cameras for 200 quid that give you an HDMI output, right? And having some cheap tellies that you found from people and all that stuff, and put the money into the stuff that's a bit more specialist that actually makes the production work, and which is your communication system probably. You can get sound desks for 200 quid for a 16, even if it's just an analog one, and you're still learning the craft. It doesn't have to be a really swanky X32 digital thing or Allen Heath. You're learning a craft, and you can learn the technology bit anywhere later on. And those, wherever you go, you'll have a new bit of kit, and you'll have to learn that new bit of kit. That's the way the world works. When you walk out of university, I thought I knew everything, and cockily walked into my first job and discovered in about 3 hours I knew absolutely nothing, and I had to very quickly start learning again. And so, but what the things you need to learn, those interactions, plugging it together, thinking about signal flow, thinking about fault finding. Actually, the more visual it is almost at this stage, the better in many ways, because you're going to be able to learn and teach the group around you, so you can swap roles. And that's the other thing that's quite powerful, is the ability to take turns and have a go. So you learn each other's skill sets, you get an appreciation of those roles, but also helping to refine your own career decision making, because at some point you're going to have to choose which pathway to follow. And if you've had a go at everything, you're going to have a much better idea of maybe what excites you and interests you. You might be much more happy plugging stuff together and configuring things on computers and engineering, or you might actually quite like sitting and pushing faders or pressing buttons on the vision mixer or making graphics. So the more you rotate and have that opportunity to be interoperable, the more you'll learn in that experience.
I think if anyone here is like runs their TV station, which I'm guessing probably most people are involved in that in some way, shape, or form. But if I think it's so important to make sure the people in your society are overtly aware that they can sign up for a job and they don't have to know anything. I know, at least when I was involved in running Sonar, we had a lot of people be like, oh, I want to, but I don't know. So we specifically ran training sessions because we had the time and the resources. We ran training sessions in different jobs and areas to give people that confidence. But even without that, making sure you've got that friendly environment where you can be like, don't worry, we'll teach you. We've got an hour before the job starts. We'll make sure that you're up to scratch, and we'll make sure that we'll do everything. But also know that it's not the end of the world. The people hiring you, or you might be doing stuff for your university. That's also a great source of jobs, is doing stuff for the university. They're aware you're students. There's only so much they can expect from you to a certain extent, whether it's because of the kit or because of what you as a group of students know. But you'll only get better through practice, and making sure that everyone gets better with you, rather than teaching yourself how to become an excellent director, an excellent camera operator, or excellent at sound mixing, or excellent at all the jobs. Making sure everyone else comes with you and you passing that knowledge on, because as soon as you leave, you want the next generation to do well as well.
There are little things which are really helpful, right? So I would really encourage people to think about, I hope this isn't offensive to anyone, the professionalization of your production. So when I went down, and I was invited down, which was great, to go and watch some of the Sonar stuff earlier this year. Some of the tips I gave were not about technology or actually the production. They were doing a great job, but it was think about your call time. Get the crew there early enough that you do a proper fact check. You're only doing your testing when you're going on air, because everyone gets in a fluster and it's horrible. So just think about, in the professional world, have a call time which is realistic. Now that's hard because everyone's students and everyone wants to go out on a Friday night, and if you're coming in on a Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, maybe you're not feeling great. But actually, just having a bit of rigor will get the team in a really good shape, and you'll make a much better production, and you'll all feel so much better for having done a great production. Have things like really good production paperwork. If you haven't got examples, ask anyone on this call here to send you some examples. So have, for example, if it's a sporting event, have a really good match running order or a game running order. So you know when kickoff is, when the teams are going to arrive, when you want to go on air, and document it really well with really accurate times, and try and keep to them, and think about where your VTs fit in. Or have really professional call sheets. Get everyone thinking about who's going to do which role that day, and set it in. Another tip I'd give is, and it's quite tricky, but put in time in if you have a weekly meeting or a get together as a group, watch it back. If you're doing stuff sort of every week, every other week, take a bit of time to watch the production. And the really cool thing to do, but quite hard to do, but it's a really good learning experience, is to record the talk back and listen to that back. Because when you hear back what you did live, you'll learn so much from it, and your etiquette, because you'll realize how much you could have improved your communication and the art of saying a lot in a little. And it's quite difficult to listen to, but I promise you, it's really rewarding. You'll learn so much from that process.
Amy,
I've got a bit of a point to add on to that as well. Is I'm quite new at Limitless, and I obviously don't know as much as like people higher up. But anytime they talk about anything audio related, even if I don't understand it, I still ask to be present and listen to it, because there will be one day that they'll keep talking to me about it, and then it will just sort of click. So getting that foot in the door, hearing what it sounds like, them talking about all the different workflows and all of that, and then eventually it will slowly start to click a little bit. And I had another point as well, adding on from what Chloe said earlier as well about having a go at all the kids like that. There isn't any stupid questions as well. We're all sort of from different backgrounds as well, and a lot of people coming into the TV production side of Solent University were like, I really just fancy learning audio, and it's that's completely fine. Where do you want me to start? Basically, at this I can go, what do you know? Basically, there's nothing crazy you could ask that there's no stupid questions. That's sort of just what I wanted to add.
Yeah, Stuart, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up your original question about why should you do multi-camera stuff. Well, if you think about, if anybody actually still watches telly on the call here, you think about, what are the big Saturday night shows? So BBC One is Strictly Come Dancing, isn't it? Michael McIntyre's The Wheel. What have ITV got? Ant and Dec's Saturday Night Takeaway, Dancing on Ice. Even I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. They're all multi-camera studio or OB type shows. And I think with the competition that the terrestrial channels have from streaming providers, those kind of live experiences are the things that they hope will drag viewers back to them. So, Netflix are experimenting a bit with live sport, aren't they? If you can call Jake Paul against Mike Tyson sport.
But people are always going to want to watch sport. I think what COVID probably taught us was that actually how important those live events are. And
absolutely,
how much
they are
from your home, from a pub or wherever.
And they're multi-camera events. So even if it's not in a studio, it's still multi-camera. So I think if you're interested in a career in this field, having that experience of a multi-camera environment and the kind of communication skills that Andy talked about, the team working, is a really good thing to have. So that's why I think it's a good idea to have a go at it and give it a go. And actually, a lot of people who have a go at it have never done it before, and they find, oh God, this is a world I really want to be in. They love it. And of course, when you have the additional pressure of a live on-air time, it focuses the mind like very few other things can do. But it also generates a very, very powerful sense of relief on the one hand, but also achievement when you come out of that show at the other end and it's gone well. So, if you like the idea of working in telly, you should definitely try and experience multi-camera. There's nothing quite like it. And multi-camera live is the thing. It's very exciting.
On the back of that, Stuart, live, there's nothing like live TV. You're right, it's that buzz of going on air, and especially in my role that I do is obviously to keep the visual side of things on air. When people are panicking, that's, I don't know, a camera's gone down or anything, that thrill of trying to get it back up and running again, knowing you've got a short time period, be it like 45 minutes of a football half, or like you say, an hour of a live Strictly show. That intense time pressure is such great fun. It's an adrenaline rush that is short-lived and it's great, and then you know how to come off. But in doing that, it goes back to that teamwork thing. If you didn't have that good team around you to help you fix it and know who to talk to, know how to work together as a team to get that up and running, to help the production side of it, you're working in this great team to get this product on air and keep it on air. And I'd say that's one of the best things about working in live TV, honestly, live TV. And also, there's an endpoint. When you do pre-recorded stuff, there's that instinct to go, oh, that wasn't quite right. I'm going to go and do it again. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again. And it just goes on and on and on. And again, a good role in that, though, is a good producer that just knows when to stop. Or a director that just says, yeah, we've had enough now. We've got about 5,000 takes. I think we can move on. But live TV, you don't get that. You have to do it right. There's no second chance. Just live with it.
And also, Chloe, I'll just add, this might not be what you want to hear, all being in student television, but actually, when I was at the university, we always used to talk about the transferable skills that you gain from that kind of experience. So, you might go for a job interview in a completely unrelated field, but they will probably ask you about, give us an example of your problem solving skills. Give us an example of where you've worked in a team. Give us an example of where communication has been difficult and you've found solutions. And you will find all of those things probably within 10 minutes of switching on your studio. So, just go for it, I would say.
I think that's a really good point. So I'm going to ask each person the same question, but about a specific area. So we've sort of covered, there are so many different options of content for live TV. And the answers might be quite similar, but hopefully they're a little bit different. So I'm going to give each panelist a different example, and I'd like to know 3 things that you would prioritize when planning or creating a production from scratch. You've got maybe a camera and a microphone, you're on a very limited budget. They can be editorially, they can be technically, they can be training, whatever. So Sarah, as your work in sport, I've given you sport. I'm gonna put you on the spot here and ask you to go first, if that's okay.
That's all right. I mean, I suppose it's leading off the back of what we've already spoken about, but one of the most important things I think can kind of get sidelined and forgotten about is those trailing, shadowing opportunities on any production, because you're future-proofing, succession planning what goes on. because you might only be there for a couple of years, a year, however long that your that part in the career takes. So succession planning training is one of the most important things, and that can just be someone sat right next to you, watching what you do and asking questions, interjecting every now and again, trying to work out what you're doing. It's seeing what's happening to then, like what Andy said, to then go off and know that this might not be the career for you because you've shadowed that person. You're like, oh, okay, it's not quite right. But in doing that, you can create a larger skill set where people can move around. So if you get sickness, you can bring someone else in because they've done a little bit of it and they understand the process. They don't necessarily be able to do the job, but they can, again, get you out of a pickle if you're doing a live production. What are the other things? Prioritizing probably is, again, what sort of where you want to do it. So if you're doing a live production, because it's mainly what I do for sport, do we do the presentation on site or do we do it back at studio at base? And there's sort of two elements of that. Like doing it live on site can potentially cost more, but you get to be in the environment. So your press and your producers and everybody is in the environment. So it's particularly probably more important if you're doing like a derby match or something where there's that rivalry between the two teams and you're like, I want to be in that atmosphere. I can give the viewer at home more of that feeling and that passion by being there. So you want to spend a little bit more by getting the press on site. But if it's not an important match as such, it's like there's no title race in it or something, or it's not a derby, just do your press on site because you've got your crew already there. They're more efficient. You've got more resilience perhaps because you've got more redundancy because all your kit is in one place. You're not out on the road. So it's sort of, there's pros and cons to both, but you need to think about that before you, or when you're planning to decide, yeah, this is what where I'm gonna do it.
I guess kind of with it just having pres full stop, like how much production value does that add? Finding a journalism student or someone that's interested in being on camera to go and do some research and start talking about whatever you're putting on stage, whether it's the theatre or live sport or whatever, having someone extra to bring the audience from at home to the atmosphere.
Yeah, and that sort of leads on to my final point. It's sort of almost like, what added value can you give the viewer at home? So for sport in particular, like added value and content will be something like analysis tool. What I mean by that is, like a Piero or something where they sort of draw on a tablet and they draw around players that appear on the screen and they move the players around and they sort of analyze it. If this player went here, he could have attacked from, and from this position and got this player around, things like that. And it's, you're helping the viewer understand a story that you're trying to tell. So it's not just a football match you are showing the passion and the story behind it by adding that press and giving the press some tools to help explain the story. That's the added value that you're giving to that viewer at home. It's a part of a production is not just sort of turn up, put some cameras out, show a match, off you go back home. Like, it's not about that. As Chloe says, it's about getting good commentary as well, because you want those people that are passionate about that know their stuff, to project that passion to the people at home. Because as a viewer at home, you might not know a lot about the particular team that you're showing, but that commentator and presenter can add that value to help that person at home understand it and be part of the story and be involved and engaged in the show.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And to be fair, I think we'll probably get a little bit of repeating here, but I guess you've kind of made a point that actually it's not, although we're doing a tech talk, all about how to build a studio, which hopefully we'll get onto in a little bit, but that's not necessarily why you should build it. And, it's not necessarily the entire goal. And probably when you are building a studio, it's something that you should think about and work with, your more creative and editorial members of your society to make sure that whatever you're giving them tech-wise fits with what they might want on a production level, and to get the best content as your final product. So I'm going to sort of ask the same question, but for Andy, sort of looking at like the entertainment side or a talk show, or I guess some of the things that Stuart was saying earlier, the Strictly Come Dancing type of shows and those kind of productions. What would you prioritize?
Yeah. Just before I start, if I can, I was going to pick up on back because it'll overlap into both. The other thing to think about, you can add real production value by actually being really clever with the tools you've got. I'll give you a really good example, and I mentioned this when I came down to watch the Amy might remember this when I popped down in February to watch the basketball. There's some techniques you can bring to add real production value and editorial value without needing really expensive tools. An example is if you've done your research and you know who in the basketball case, you know who your big defender in defense is versus your offense player, you can do what I call matchups. So if you've thought about this in your running order, you can go 5 minutes before the match, I want camera, 18-yard left and camera 18-yard right, both to find me an ISO, those two players. We're going to talk about them this time. And I'm going to make a picture-in-picture of one player on the left, one on the right, and allow my commentator team, my presentation team, to talk about the difference in their characteristics. Maybe have a graphic on their height or their weight, whatever the relevant sporting or athletic characteristic is that tells the story of why that's going to be where the match is won and lost. Because it's those two fighting, the guy trying to defend and trying to kick the ball away versus the guy trying to shoot it in. Or in football, it might be attacking, whatever it is. So you can find these techniques which are used every day in Sky Sports and TNT to tell stories that aren't just really, really expensive tools that you probably can't get hold of, to still tell brilliant stories. And that's part of the work is. And I was about to say, to answer your actual question about the prepping and planning, it's worth looking at what are the stories you're going to tell today? How are you going to tell those stories? And do you tell them pre-game? Do you tell them at half-time? Do you tell them post-match? And think about how you weave that narrative in, because you can build a really credible, strong editorial story if you know what those are going to be. And you haven't got to spend lots of money on whiz-bang tech to necessarily do that. You can really think about your storytelling.
I was just gonna interrupt there and say, with like the making a picture-in-picture and adding graphics and stuff, they seem really high. You need lots of knowledge about it, or you need lots of certain bits of technology. You don't at all, because that is available in the cheaper market, or some of the options that we've already mentioned. And then when it comes to training, there are resources available. There's NaSTA, there's networking and asking other people. NaSTA can ask other people. SIMTI and other organizations who are there, who will be more than happy to help you out if you've got specific questions. But also a lot of this stuff which people use for making their own streaming setups is on YouTube. And I don't want to be like, go to YouTube rather than us, but there are lots of resources, and there are, even if you don't know the information, someone else does. And one thing I've learned so far in TV is that people are always more than happy to teach you something or explain something to you, or take a moment and be like, yes, I can help you. I can get you that next step in production or whatever. You don't need that technology.
So things that might be different in entertainment show or a talk show. In sport, you very, very rarely have to worry about lighting, because the chances are that for the game to be played, it will require a adequate level of lighting. So if you're in an indoor basketball arena, it'll be well lit. If you're outdoors, the chances are you'll have floodlights. You might think about what we call a basher or two, just for the presentation positions, where maybe your reporter's going to be, or your pitch side press, because maybe there's not quite enough lighting for them. But otherwise, that won't be an issue. Now, on an entertainment show, if you're going to do live music, or if you're trying to do Strictly Come Dancing or something really ambitious, then clearly you'll have to think very carefully about how the lighting will work and where you're shooting from, and that'll probably require quite a lot more. So if you're working with a partner who's putting on a show or performance, you'll have to sit down early and think about what's it look like for the stage audience, if it's going to be a live audience in the room, because it needs to look good for them, but also how that lighting carry on camera, so you can really see what you're doing. And you think quite carefully about the shots and where they're going to go in, so they don't cross over or get in the way. So what you don't want in a live, one of the biggest arts of studio directing, and if you've ever watched, there's a brilliant video, go and watch behind the scenes of the Eurovision Song Contest, because this is the best way to learn this skill, is the choreography that a director will play with all the camera ops, whether that's jibs, whether that's fixed cable cameras, whether it's wireless steady cameras. There's an absolute pre-planned choreographed art to all those studio shows, which is pre-engineered and pre-designed, so the camera ops never get in each other's way. So when it cuts from when the close-up pulls in, suddenly the steady camera running behind him, so you can't see him, and he'll spin around and he'll cut to that, and he'll do the run around shot, and then run out of shot, and suddenly you never see that on the screen. All that magic is hidden. It's the magic of telly, right? We lie to people all the time and pull the wool over their eyes, and that's the stuff you won't see. If we're going to do that kind of show, you need to think really hard about that choreography, so you don't fall over yourself and your team don't follow each other, and it's all planned. And that's what I mean about planning in advance, planning your running order really carefully, thinking about those shot angles, thinking about how it all fits together and glues together, so you can tell that story, which is about whatever the entertainment might be.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. So Amy, I'm going to ask you a different area again, obviously. So more of like the corporate side, because quite often, at least in my experience in student TV, some of the opportunities that come along are, you know, someone wants something corporate or something streamed live or whatever. Not necessarily most interesting of content, but they can be really good, you know, learning opportunities. What would you prioritize when thinking about prepping for those kind of things?
Yeah, so I haven't done quite a lot of conferences, but I know they can be quite versatile. There's so many conferences that it could be. So I sort of would take it like a very big like pre-planning for this event. A lot to know about the event, like how many people are going to be talking, and especially what is the setting of the event. Some conferences could be in big halls, some conferences could be maybe around like a little small table. Knowing this for like the live stream, you'll be able to gauge like how many cameras are needed, especially as well with positions. If it's quite a small conference, you're not really wanting to have many cameras around, but you want to be sort of strategic in where they're placed as well. As well with audio, if it's like around a small table, you might go for like a boundary mic sitting in the middle of the table. If it's in a bigger hall, would you use a handheld? Are they going to be doing maybe live demos where lapels might be a little bit easier to use? I think I'd definitely take a look at the equipment you own as well, because they might say if they want to provide like a presentation, how are you going to get that to your gallery side of it? If there's an audio feed, you need to sort of be embedding some stuff. But also looking at the equipment.
I think your audio is cutting out a bit, Amy, or at least it is for me. I don't know if it is.
Sorry.
But I just like with talking about different like equipment, that's a great example of making sure that whatever you do decide to purchase and invest in, you're making it as versatile as possible. So even for today, even if you're not thinking about the future and expanding, for the jobs that you might be offered today, or you know might want to try and bid for today, making sure that whatever you have is giving you the most options to be able to complete, to be able to say yes to them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because on top of that point, I sort of made that point as well. With the equipment you own, you might not actually know where you're going to be positioned. You might not be in the room with where the conference is going on. Can your equipment fit in the room if you're in there? Are you able to get your equipment set up in a different room with, say, audio monitoring and stuff like that? But yeah, I think definitely thinking about where you're going to be positioned, what you're going to be getting as well. I think a lot of the time in conference as well, you dress smart and you want to present yourself quite nicely as well. And a big one is then like cable management. Is your kit set up nicely? Is your camera in the way? Is this cable like a trip hazard and stuff like that? I think definitely looking at the setting is very.
I think we might have lost Amy.
Sorry. My Wi-Fi is a bit of a shambles today, which is probably not good.
That's okay. I think you made some really good points there. And just to like keep us moving along, I'll ask you last but not least, if you're looking at like maybe a news show or a current events show, what would you want to prioritize?
Well, I mean, it was great. Sarah was the first person to mention the word story. And I think that's the key thing here. And, you know, we're all storytellers and we're all working in the service of the story. Now, the story might be a football match, you know, it might be moments within a football match. As Andy said, it might be a story that you're sort of creating about a head-to-head battle. News programs are full of little stories, which are told in a sort of journalistic way. Current affairs is often one story told over half an hour or something like that. So I think the key thing is to understand what the story is that's being told. And then you have to think about, well, what's the best way for us to tell that story visually and orally? In terms of news, I mean, if you look at the BBC 10 o'clock news now, everything is very automated on there. There's no camera operators on the floor anymore. They're all remote cameras, which is an interesting development. And I think they're quite proud of it because contrary to what Andy said a few moments ago, they're quite keen to show their cameras in shot sometimes in a kind of look at us kind of way, aren't we? Aren't we at the cutting edge? But I think my main point, Chloe, would be about, as I say, it's about story. What's the story you've got to tell, and then figure out the best way to tell that story. Yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think between the four of you, you've definitely covered every point that I could have come up with to cover this. So, yeah. What was I going to go on to next? So, sort of one thing I want to compare is we've sort of been like talking about a lot of the BBC and Sky Sports and the very high end productions that come with a budget and funding and unlimited studio time or space or resources. And I kind of want to compare what we might choose if we were making a production and we had an unlimited budget versus having no budget. So I mean, I'm going to actually open this up to anyone. But does anyone have anything that they, with an unlimited budget they would use, but then what would be the alternative with no budget? More specifically about the technology, I suppose, now.
Well, the first thing to say is there's no such thing as an unlimited budget. You're living in complete fantasy land there.
I have nothing to do with budget, so yes, I suppose But in comparison to a student budget, what feels like an infinitely bigger budget and resources.
Well, I think sometimes, the thing with big budgets is that, how can I put this? The thing with small budgets is that they really encourage creativity, and they encourage people to find ways of doing things that are within their purview, within what they can afford and within what they can do. So, a big budget does not necessarily mean a successful production or a big a successful movie or a great TV show. A great story usually means a great TV show or a great movie, and you can tell a great story on a tiny budget. And often you can tell it better on a tiny budget. I always use the example of, probably only Andy and I are old enough to remember this film coming out, the Blair Witch Project, which was shot, I think, for something like $20,000 and made $200 million. Okay, so by some measures, that's the most successful film of all time because of its return against investment. But they, as filmmakers, they didn't have any money, basically. So they had to find a way of telling that story, and actually made a virtue out of the fact that they had very little money by basically sort of self-shooting and pretending it. Anyway, they did a great job. So I don't think people should get hung up on the fact that, well, we haven't got any money, we can't do it. I think what they should be thinking is, we haven't got any money, how can we do it? And if you take that attitude and approach, then I think you'll go a long way. And actually, if you ever work in television, you'll be welcomed with open arms if you say you're used to working with small budgets, because the vast majority of telly now is working on smaller budgets, decreasing budgets rather than increasing budgets.
I sort of agree. I think I alluded to earlier, I would urge people against wasting money on really high-end tech that you don't really need. Like people, I was talking to people the other day, some students at the MPTS show in the summer at Olympia, who thought they needed to put 4K cameras in the studio. I have no idea why anyone thinks that's a sensible investment, even if it's only a £500 uplift, right? If you do that over 4 cameras, that's $2,000 you could have put into something else, like we talked about, which you probably haven't got. So I honestly, it's really worth thinking about the infrastructure in a much bigger way. Yeah, cameras are relatively cheap now. And the money you have got, spend it on things which will allow you to really practice your craft, as we've been talking about, and come together as a team. Even flight cases, right, can chew into your budget. It's amazing how quickly you can spend as much money keeping stuff safe and looked after for transit as you can on the stuff that goes inside the box these days, because a lot of the kit is cheap. ATEM might cost you £800, but you'll spend another £180 in a box to put it in. And the same is true with cameras. But I would try and think about how you can get those component parts to give you a really lovely surface area, by surface area, there's where lots of people are touching in the production. So you've got people doing graphics, and people doing media play, and people doing sound, and people doing grams or sound effects, as you might call it nowadays. People, a different vision mixer to a director, that kind of thing. So you're holding those skills. If you can afford it and can get a nice control panel for your vision mixer, brilliant. Have some nice buttons if you can afford it. If you can't, make do with the Stream Deck or something else. But think about facilitating those roles.
I was just gonna say, I think research into where is best to spend your money, and options that you don't have to buy, but stuff doesn't have to be bought brand new. Just because it's a couple of years old does not mean it's automatically out of date. Although the new shiny stuff is 4K and all of this, 12G and IP or whatever, actually the stuff that was brand new 10 years ago is still just as usable and will make just as good a stream if you put the time and effort into getting it set up in a way that's going to be beneficial for the.
I think one of the interesting dilemmas that young people face with these fixed budgets is probably, you just touched on it then, Chloe, is whether to think about hardware interfaces and equipment. So do you go for HDMI, SDI, or SDI type interconnects into hardware products for your switching and audio, or do you look at some sort of network-based technology? NDI is probably an obvious candidate, and do you put NDI cameras in, or things that convert to NDI and graphics and stuff? So I think it's worth thinking about what works for you and your environment. How easy is it to transport? How easy is it to get spares for it? What's the overall cost of ownership? I think there's pros and cons for both. And in some ways, if you can afford to have a bit of both, it means you're learning about both skill sets. And again, if you've got people who know how to use NDI, that's going to set you up well for moving into industry, as well as it is legacy things like SDI and HDMI. So I don't think there's a right answer, but think and consider those options carefully, I think. And it may even be a hybrid, right? Sometimes you might decide to have a hardware switch vision mixing plane. So you might buy a relatively cheap. So what you might decide to do is do it in a modular way, but get maybe like a small hardware vision mixer to do just basic camera cutting. There's not a lot of power in here for things like downstream keying graphics, because it doesn't have an HTML5 renderer. So you might want to plug that into a computer and then run something like vMix or OBS, and then do the keying downstream off your Singular Live, or Overlays.uno is a brilliant free HTML5 graphics piece of software. Doesn't cost a penny. It's completely free, designed by Singular Live, who is a professional environment, but they've done it for free for the gaming environment, and you can do anything you want: scoreboards, lower thirds, name supers, whatever you want. So that's a really useful, powerful tool, which you can look at to use for live graphics.
I think one thing I was just going to say, sort of mentioned that, and also what Stuart said earlier about, not the some of the best things can be made on such a small budget, is actually that one of the best things I learned when going to like NaSTA events or talking to other students from other universities is knowing that you're not alone. It very much feels like you're the only set of students that could possibly be going through having no money and no resources and no time. You think you're the only people that are fighting against the world, but actually every other society in the country is doing the same thing, and it's the same in industry. Budgets are tight, even if they're on a different scale. Everyone is everyone's worked on a small scale, low budget production at least once in their life. If not, how have you gotten into TV? It doesn't really happen. You can't really get into TV without doing that stuff. So people will always, you're not alone, and you're not on your own. You're not on a boat on your own, really.
And even if you do it in a really rudimentary way, try and add all those features at the edge that just add new roles for people and add completeness to the production. Try and add auto cue, even if it's a laptop under the monitor with someone scrolling on a mouse, right? Try and add things like bubble and sound effects, just because it enriches the program and it's starting to make you think about the editorial completeness of that show. So just try and think about the program as a whole entity. And people often just start with a couple of cameras and some microphones, but you can, I can play sound effects. In the academy, we run our entire sound effects panel off a phone, running a free piece of software with a touchpad, and you can play in bubble and sound effects and all sorts of things. So we make a game show with all the sound effects. Literally run off a phone for free. It doesn't cost a penny. So
yeah, great example there. I don't know if Sarah or Amy, did you have any points towards that? Or
the only thing I would sort of also say is, if you are going to invest in bits of kit, think about how much use you're going to get out of them. You don't want to invest in a bit of kit. I don't know, say you want to buy a drone because money's not an object. how many times are you realistically going to use that? Is it worth spending that money on the drone, or is it worth just buying another camera, or upgrading your vision mixer? So as Andy said, it's got keys on it and things like that you can put those graphics on, and things like that you're going to get more added value out. You want to know, you want to invest in those key pieces that you can use again and again and again. It's that cost per use that you're going to get out of it, rather than, oh, I just want to go all out for this one production because that's got a lot riding on it. Yes, that's good, but if you're not going to get the return off it, it's kind of a little bit wasted.
Yeah, sorry, my Wi-Fi has been a bit of a pain today. But I sort of wanted to add as well, from like the audio perspective as well, things like having, and like even getting further down the line with like Dante and IP connections isn't a must for small broadcasts as well. Even just like from the diagram we saw earlier, embedding the mics down the camera is same, it's reliable, it still works, you're still getting audio in as well. I think definitely going back to the thing about comms as well is very important, so everyone's sort of doing all the same things together, where we're at in the broadcast. I think that's definitely a great way to go. And then sort of from that point, if say like I don't know if I don't know what that is.
Sorry, I'm playing my sound effects. The demo, and I didn't put my mic was muted. It wasn't. I'm so sorry.
I don't know if you can still see me, guys. My camera on my side has frozen, but yeah, going back to the point of comms and all of that, when you sort of then maybe might progress and then say get better cameras, and it does get a bit more complex, that's sort of when you can then be thinking about what would look more, say, like nice on camera, like RF mics. You don't want the wires to be dangling and stuff like that. That's when you sort of can go more of like an appearance route as well, innovate in that sort of way. But with stuff like Dante, it's not necessarily a must. It's nice to have, but there's a lot more things you can know in sort of like what to prioritize in a broadcast to help you out more than having it just to look nice and sound innovative. I can't say that word, but that's sort of what I wanted to add a little bit.
Yeah,
it's great that Amy's here to sing the praises of sound, even though we're struggling to hear her a little bit. But as a general rule, student productions are let down by the quality of their sound. So I think if you've got a little bit of extra money to spend and you're shooting on HD, don't as Andy said, what's the point in upgrading everything to 4K? I think that money would be far better spent in investing in some good quality microphones that you can make sure that, for all your beautiful pictures, if we can't hear what's happening, you've lost us. So think very carefully about your audio.
Yeah.
I think that's quite a good point. There was I think someone was looking at it like as a dissertation, or it was a project that I saw one time where it was saying, can the video's great and stuff like that, but the level of audio can almost sort of distract you as well. So it is definitely a big, like a vital part that can put you off watching, because then it's not nice hearing bad audio. But if the video necessarily isn't 4K, it's not really noticeable to the most common eye, but it is still in the way of innovation. But I definitely focus on making it pleasant for the viewers with audio rather than aesthetically pleasing for the eye, I'd say. Maybe
I think this is a good example. I mean, we can't even see you, you're literally blurred, and yet we understand everything you're saying, so your points are coming across, and it's completely true. In the human psychovisual systems, our brain responds far better to visual loss and audio loss. As you know, we're trained to hear danger, and so we respond much better to visual problems than we do to audio. Audio is much more important. So you can, that's why to get into technical streaming stuff, in the streaming ladders for YouTube and any streaming service, Sky Sports, whatever, the bottom rung of the streaming ladder is, the top ladder is 4K HDR pictures, beautiful, all the way down to no pictures, but there's still some sound. Because if you've still got some sound, you can still tell a story and it can still keep you engaged. And I couldn't agree more with Stuart's point, actually. Arguably, sound is the most important thing. Start with good sound. spend a little bit of money on better microphones, work really hard making it clear and good. And you're right, you can make or destroy a production completely on basis of bad sound. Pictures will be fine. It's absolutely true. Absolutely true.
I think I definitely had plenty of experiences where you listen back to something afterwards and you're like, that is not a good show because it doesn't sound good, and you've forgotten to prioritize audio, or there just hasn't been the time to do it. Actually, realistically, it should be your first priority.
Well, that's the reason why no one's bothered about second screens on TV, right? Most people sit on their sofas now watching TV, but in reality, 95% of them are coming through Facebook or Instagram, whatever. They're still watching because they can hear it, which is the whole story is being told through audio. The pictures are just painting the top, honestly.
Yeah. And,
this is probably not a good point. Oh, sorry. This is probably not a good point to make. But I mean, this is like towards students. I think especially going to like the pub on a night out and stuff like that, watching a football game, and you're like, you notice that you can't hear the commentators and stuff like that, and it feels weird, that sort of side of it. Just a little point that I always notice it when there is per se like no audio, but I'll happily watch it on listen to it on the radio and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think it's a good point to, like, I guess in general, is that because it's live and because we're talking mainly, even if it's a multi-camera, obviously you can record it and put it out afterwards, but most of the time you're doing things live, and I'm sure any editors will hate me for saying this, you can't fix it in post. A lot of the time I'm sure, fix it in post or whatever for if you're doing, filming something, there is no post, and that can be both very nerve-wracking and scary, but also, like we were talking earlier, it's such an adrenaline rush when like you have to get it right that one time, and it can make it so much more fun as well because you can't fix it in post, and also you don't have to do post, you don't have to think about what's on, you can then forget about it, and there's no pressure to remember what you were doing. So I'm sort of going to probably round out what we're talking about today, because we're sort of running towards the end of time. If we get a little bit of time, I might answer some questions, or people can feel free to email me or any of the other exec with questions, and we can get suitable responses put out there. I wanted to talk a bit about the training side of it and making sure we are upskilling, because I'm sure all four of you and myself have all trained other people, whether it's a student, me and Amy, probably more like a student-to-student thing, or it's like Stuart as a lecturer. What, both from like teaching yourself but then also teaching other people and learning and being a learner, what tips would you give to students to make sure that they're making the best use of the like learning time they might have, and asking the right questions and that kind of stuff? I hope that question made sense.
Well, I'd say, first of all, don't be afraid of trying something new. And Andy made the point earlier that you're in a situation now where, you can learn from things that go wrong without getting sacked or, losing the commission or, whatever terrible things might befall a television company. So make a point of trying things out that you haven't tried before, because you never know what you might discover that you love. So I remember a student many years ago who I put her on lighting for a studio show. She said, I don't know anything about lighting. I hate lighting. What? I don't even, I'm not interested in lighting. I said, just have a go at it. And then 2 months later, she was working on Mastermind with the lighting director of Mastermind, doing some work experience in the lighting department. Okay, so she found something that she never knew she would love until she tried it. So do that. Have a go at something that you think, even if you think you're going to hate it, just have a go at it. And at least if it confirms that, yes, you're right, I do hate it, at least right? But the chances are you'll find something in it that'll excite you or sort of turn you on, or whatever phrase you want to use. So I think that's a really important, and you've got the opportunity to do it in the environment that you're all working in, right? So have a go at things you've never had a go at before. And the other thing I would say is, like Chloe has done and Amy has done, don't be afraid to teach your fellow students what you know, because it's a very good way actually of reinforcing yourself what you know. Okay, so it gives you a bit of confidence as well. Hey, I know stuff that this person doesn't. That's cool. But that kind of peer-to-peer tutoring and teaching is so important. And I think you'll find it'll carry on throughout your careers, actually, that kind of thing goes on all the time. So have a go at things you don't think you want to have a go at. And don't be afraid to share your knowledge and to be sort of open with the knowledge that you've gained.
I'm doing some of that peer-to-peer training at the moment at work, because everyone in my department have sort of different areas that they know more about, and I've been given an opportunity to specialize in IP and do a lot more training on that. And so now it's my responsibility to teach other people who have been at Sky and have been in the industry long, way before I started university, or have been there for years. But I feel like I now have this knowledge, and it's my responsibility to pass it on. And it is a responsibility, and it's also a privilege to be able to pass that information on, because you're then able to make sure that someone else knows someone else might find something that they're interested in, especially when you're talking about student TV. By pushing someone to learn something new or teaching them something, it gives them that opportunity to go and do something different if they do want to, like the woman you talk about going into lighting. I had it very similarly when I started realizing that I wanted to go into tech. I learned from my fellow students a lot more than the tech side on my degree, and that's meant I'm now an engineer. But most of the stuff I've learned are from my peers when it comes to the technology and engineering side of it. Amy,
I would also say, just quickly on the back of that, it's also, if you are the trainer in that situation, because you're training and imparting that knowledge, it then also gives you the headspace to go and learn something else as well. So if you're that student that's gained something but you want to pass it on, you can go, I'll pass that on now. I don't need to remember that. Or you do remember it as such, but what I mean is you create more headspace for you to go and learn something else. So it's benefiting you as a trainer as well as the person you are training.
Especially in student TV, the last thing you want to be is the only person that knows that information. Because if you're off ill or you have an event and someone else wants to put on a basketball show or whatever, a show, and you're the only one that knows how to set up the equipment, well, you've just cornered yourself. And you've meant that you have to pick, and you have to let down your station, or if you have to let down a family event or whatever the other thing you were planning to do is. And that's never a good position to be in. You want to be able to say, I'm not available, but this person who I've spent weeks training and who have shadowed me before, they are more than capable. And if in an emergency, I'm at the end of a phone. You want to actually be that step away and make sure that you're not the only person that knows information. Sorry, Amy, we'll actually let you talk now.
Something that I used to do at Solon is, say I'd go to a Solon events training and I'd basically learn that my housemate that I lived with did psychology. So something that's completely irrelevant, no knowledge on audio or video, I'd go and sort of teach it to them in a way that I hoped they'd understand. And it really it strengthens the way that it sort of gears you up almost to teach yourself, because you're starting from scratch. Basically, you're going through all the fundamentals of it as well, but then even just talking about it and going through it with someone, you're almost teaching yourself at the same time as well, which really helped. And I found that when I was head of sound doing training, this really helped, starting from really like the fundamentals and being confident with what you're saying as well.
Unless anyone else has any specific points, I think it's probably a good time to wrap up. Thank you everyone for coming, and anyone hopefully that watches this in the future, and thank you to all of our panelists for taking time out of your evening. I mean, like you literally said, we all love talking about our jobs, and hopefully we're able to impart some knowledge onto the next generation.